Alrighty, guys. Welcome to 20 Minutes with 2020 Mendocino, our weekly podcast segment where we cover different topics such as growing, feminization, and just general cannabis industry subjects. This week, we will be discussing STS. I am joined alongside my co-host, the founder of 2020, Adam. Hello, Adam. How you doing?
Hey, how's it going, Carlos?
Pretty good, man. It's been a pretty eventful week. I've been running all over the state of Oklahoma. It's harvest across the nation. I know you've been doing some outdoor harvesting yourself. How's that going for you over there in California?
That's right. Yeah, it's harvest in the air for sure. That and heavy smoke in the air. But it's been quite an interesting year, and I think I've gone over this before on several podcasts in the past. But we do an outdoor pheno hunt every year where we grow between well, this year it was I believe 180 different phenos that we ran through about 10 strains, I think. And we grow them in this kind of antiquated patch of ours that's from the past that really has no commercial value, but it's a great place to run a pheno hunt in that it's in the shade in the fall time, and it's known for pretty bad powdery mildew and mold, and it's just really a poor place to grow, but a really good place to test outdoor strains and really kind of see what the best of the best is as far as hardiness and able to kind of persevere through some pretty poor conditions. So, and we've been really figuring out what strains can do the best there, and then taking the ones from the previous years and crossing them with our best from the years before that, and it's been quite a fun experiment. So what we've really done is done a really good job of just getting these strains that finish in late September and early October, and so yeah, we've harvested a decent amount of those, and they're looking fabulous. So we'll be finishing up the harvest here in the next couple of weeks.
I know we're also excited.
So it was,
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say the downside to this year is all the ash in the air. It's just covered the flowers in ash, and then we have to wear respirators just to harvest because it's so bad. It's just like just living in a thick cloud of ash when we're harvesting. So
Yeah, the closest thing
at least we're harvesting.
the closest thing to post-apocalyptic harvest, huh?
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, orange moon. It's the orange moon harvest here in Northern California right now. Not just the harvest orange moon, not just the harvest moon.
Right on. I just wanted to remind everybody, because I know we're excited, that next Friday we'll be releasing Whistling Moon Traveler, which is another Durban cross, which will also introduce our first ever regular variety pack, which is all of our Durban crosses, including DB, KB, and Double Durban. And then we're also releasing Avenue of the Giants as well, which I know you're pretty excited about. And everybody in Northern California has been pretty excited about as they're harvesting it this year. And we're also restocking pre-98 Bubbas. So I just wanted to remind everybody about that. I know we're pretty excited about those releases.
Absolutely, and I want to correct you on that. It's actually Wednesday, so it's the first.
Oh,
So,
right.
yep, we'll be they should be all dropping around the first. Although technically the bubbas are available beforehand, so if those have made it into the hands of seed banks, they're available now.
Now, I'm going to correct you on that. That's the 7th.
Yeah, the 7th. Isn't that Wednesday?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. Oh, did I say the first?
Yeah. Like, we're living.
Yeah, sorry. It was supposed to be the first, and then we changed it to the 7th.
Yeah, it's officially.
Yes. October 7th, Wednesday. Okay.
All right.
And yes, the Durbans, Whistling Moon Traveler, Avenue. These are really some exciting drops that we're doing here. So I highly recommend everyone get a hold of Avenue of the Giants. It's not a big production run, and there's only going to be so many available, and it's really it's kind of over the top strain. So it's terpenes on terpenes on terpenes. So grab it while you can.
Now, this episode is about STS, and I just want to apologize to everybody because on our first episode that we covered this subject, we kind of just rolled into it and didn't really give people any explanation on what STS is or basically anything on the feminization process. So let's start from the beginning, Adam. Um, can you please start out by explaining the general principles of plant sex reversal, the pros and cons of using reverse plants versus males from a breeder's perspective, and common misconceptions concerning feminized seeds? I know that's a loaded question, but I think it's a great intro into this episode.
Yes, it's definitely a good question, and this is, I think, in general, this whole episode is kind of the FAQs of STS, but I think this one covers a lot of these general basic questions we get from people. So, yeah, the principles of reversing the plant. I mean, it's just essentially how feminized seeds are made, and it's forcing a female plant to produce pollen, and that pollen does not have any Y chromosomes in the DNA, so therefore it only produces female offspring. I can jump into some misconceptions. Some people say, "Oh, it's only 99%, or it's only 90%." That's 100% not true. What makes it 99% is contamination from a male. So you either have males nearby, your neighbors have males, or you have it on your property or on your clothes or something. So there is a 0% chance of producing a male seed from a reversed plant. And that's just the simple laws of genetics, and of course back to the Y chromosome thing. So as far as the pros and cons, well, I'm definitely in the camp, and I've become in this camp over time, is in that I really don't see any cons. It's all positive, and I can kind of go into that a little bit here. If there's anything that there's a reason to not use feminine to use reverse plants to breed with, it's that it's more effort. It's a lot, it's more complicated. It takes a lot more planning, more preparing, paperwork, keeping track of things. Whereas just using males is way easier. However, it's less effective, and it's much more of a crapshoot. And the best way to explain that is that when you reverse a plant, you know exactly what kind of female traits you're passing on, and what female traits that is in that DNA. And when you're using a male, it's a complete crapshoot. I mean, certainly you can do the stem rub or whatever, or you can grow them out until you see resin glands on them, and maybe get some terpenes from that. But to me, it's a beautiful thing to be able to know exactly the female traits that you're passing on. And I'm going to bring up a talk that I saw from Mr. Soul. So one of the great examples that I heard in a talk one time from Mr. Soul from Brothers Grimm Seeds, which I think sums it up perfectly, is that you can't judge the characteristics that a man is gonna pass on to his daughter. So, for instance, you don't know the size of breasts that a man's daughter is going to have based on the man, although you may based on the mother, because she's passing on the female characteristics. So it's a similar argument in that you don't really know what the male traits are going to be, or how to judge a male and determining how he's going to produce the best female. So we're total fans of that ideology, and phenohunting the best females and then reversing them onto the best females, or in some cases selfing them, which we can talk about later. And that wasn't part of this FAQ, but maybe we'll make it part of it. So one of the biggest misconceptions about feminized seeds is the fact that people think that feminized seeds equals hermaphrodites. Now, that's actually around here in Northern California. That's a huge misconception, and it's kind of an old school thing. So we have this kind of cannabis cultivation is part of our culture. It goes back into the 60s, and it's been these things that have kind of been passed on from generation to generation. Like, don't mess with feminized seeds because you're going to have a higher hermaphrodite rate. Now, I certainly don't want to start arguments with people because I have friends that will tell me that, and we have uh, we have arguments about it that are you know, you have your opinion, I have mine type arguments. But I can tell you with 100% certainty that that is a false statement. And one of the reasons why goes back to exactly what I was saying before, in that if you are capable of growing the female before taking her DNA by reversing her onto another female, you can actually determine if that plant carries hermaphroditic traits. And then the way to do that would be to stress test the female. Whereas a male, it's extremely difficult to see if that male carries the hermaphroditic gene. So the best way to try to eliminate hermaphrodites is to reverse plants that you know don't have the hermaphroditic gene close to the surface of their DNA. And one of the best ways to do that is to chemically reverse the plant, as opposed to rotalization, which I believe is coming up here in a future comment. So I'm gonna save that part of the talk, because I can then explain why and how this misconception came to be through through a very simple explanation.
Well,
So
let's actually jump right into that, because STS, which we offer for sale on a link on our website, is one of the methods that we use. But there are other methods. One you just mentioned, rotalization. But there's also colloidal silver, which we get asked about a lot. Can you kind of just go into all three and the pros and cons, and why we use each? And another common question that we get is, does either of these methods affect the quality of the offspring in any way?
okay, yeah, good question. So yeah, there's basically three three general ways of reversing a female plant. There's STS, which is the most common method we use. There's colloidal silver, um, which is basically a very similar process, different related but different chemical. And then rotalization. So let's talk about rotalization first, because this is going to kind of tie into the first comments that I made. So the original way that people figured out, when they figured out how to make feminized seeds, was really by accident. It's that they started getting hermaphrodites would open up, and then they would end up with a bunch of seeds, and then somebody at some point was like, wow, all these are females. Well, a hermaphrodite will only produce female seeds. So the problem is that those seeds carry that gene. Now, in my opinion, all cannabis actually carries the hermaphroditic gene. I just like to say that certain strains or phenotypes carry it closer to the surface, is how I like to put it. And that most cases in it's buried pretty deep, and in some it's floating near the surface and is ready to jump out. And so with rotalization, that's a process of stressing a plant in order to make it reverse. That is the wrong way to do it. I highly recommend never doing that, because it's not a chemical process at all. It is bringing that trait to the surface. And the easier it's done, the more likely you're going to have hermaphroditic trait passed on to your offspring. And I've seen everything from people just heating up the room, to one of the ways they used to do it in Amsterdam was with a cigarette lighter, like basically a Bic lighter, and just like burn the side of the plant. And apparently it works pretty good. It's if the trait's there, you're gonna get some male flowers coming out. But again, stay away from this method. Don't be fooled by people saying that it's organic and it's the way to do it. It's not the way to do it. And then colloidal silver is another one. Certainly works. It costs more money. The colloidal silver is more expensive. You have to be a little more diligent about keeping the plants coated. We would usually when we've done that, we usually run it every day. Whereas the STS, you can do between 3 to 5 days spraying intervals, and so it's just less labor in general. But if you only have access to colloidal silver, or you want to make your own at home, it's pretty easy to make, and it's pretty difficult to make it real precise unless you have a really good scale and some decent equipment. But you can definitely just make it with some 9-volt batteries and some silver wire. I recommend just buying it. I like to buy the 1,000 part per million and then break it down and run it at about 40 parts per million, and it works. It's pretty foolproof. As far as affecting the quality of the offspring, from my experience and our observations, no, it's the same. The DNA is passed on between the STS and the colloidal silver. So I think that answers those questions.
Now, one common question that we do get is, when using STS, is it something that you generally start with a clone, or something that you can start seeds and then reverse those seeds that you pop? I know it's a basic question, but a lot of people ask that.
Yeah, and the answer is you can certainly do either. We generally start from clone because we're mostly phenohunting something before. Again, going back to what, how we choose what we're going to reverse is that we determine that it's the pheno that we want, and that it doesn't necessarily have a close to surface hermaphroditic trait or whatnot, and we will start from clone. But it can definitely be done from seed, and we've done it before. And but the problem again is that you're not really testing the quality of the females of the individual phenotypes beforehand. So as soon as you start to see hairs, I mean, normally you can determine the sex of the plant before you even flip it into flower, for the most part, unless they're really young and immature. So seeds or clones, either one.
Now, going into clones, because this kind of goes into another question that we get a lot. Are there particular strains that are more difficult to reverse than others? Some people always mention things like PK, the Pure Kush, or some of the original OGs. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so 100% for sure. Now, I have yet to really determine how to break that down. I mean, I've heard people say that the land race or the more stabilized strains are harder to reverse. I have not proven that, because I've actually seen strains that I considered to be very stable that reversed easy, and others that were fairly wild genetics that polyhybrid, insane polyhybrids that were really hard to reverse. And I've also seen another thing that would kind of negate that argument, is that I've seen different phenotypes from the same seed run produce varying results. So yes, the answer is 100% for sure. Some strains just dump pollen on a reversal. Others, it's much more difficult to get a viable amount of pollen from. And what I recommend when you encounter these situations, in fact, I recommend this if you're doing any sort of production with STS or reversing, you really want to learn that strain before you commit, because at the committal stage, you're going deep in. So you start growing a whole room full of something in order to make seeds with it. You better be fairly certain that you're going to get pollen, or you're going to waste a lot of money and time. So we always test anything that hasn't been reversed. We run a pre-test run with it, and in order to prove that we can do it. And then that also gives us some opportunity to tweak the recipe per se. I mean, not the actual STS recipe, but the maybe our schedule of spraying and whatnot. So I wish that I had a solid answer on 100% guaranteed how to do it. But I think that there's going to be some other questions that come up here that will probably answer a lot of the questions on how we go about working and jumping through over those hurdles as much as we can.
Well, perfect, because I know that one question that we get a lot is, does light intensity affect pollen production? Now, I want to also mention something that I hope you touch on. I know that temperature has been a factor that we've noticed as well. So can you touch on those subjects?
Yes. So a couple things that make an effect are that will affect the production of pollen is the general health of the plants. So the healthier the plant, the more likely you're going to get good pollen from it. We have anecdotal evidence that heat and dry and humidity is a factor. Um, at one point, we were struggling with a strain. I can't recall what it was. It just wasn't putting out much pollen. We cranked the heat way up in the room, and it seemed like we started getting quite a bit more pollen from it. Um, Again, that's anecdotal, but we have been sort of going with that philosophy since then, and running the room quite a bit hotter than normal. And so I would say the light intensity would maybe have something to do with that, but we've had good luck with reversals uh, with LEDs that where the plants weren't optimally close like they would be if you were just in a flower production type facility. So I don't know if the light intensity makes much of a difference. And also, I've seen where the bottom buds still produce pretty much just as much pollen or the same as the buds near the light. So I don't necessarily think the light intensity affects it much, but the health of the plant does. And so I think optimally you want to run at as the best conditions possible that you would consider for flower production.
Perfect.
And
So
I will finish on humidity. Definitely dry, because I mean the pollen sap soaks up moisture. It travels better when it's dry. So even if you're producing the same amount, you want to, before you start really trying to spread it around the room, if that's what you're doing, if you're not like hand painting it on, you want to dry the basically dry the air out as much as possible.
okay, so I kind of want to veer, not subject, but veer the question line. Let's go into our STS spray and just a quick frequently asked questions segment about our spray. So I have a list here of common questions that we get. So one of them, probably the top one that we get, is how many days do I need to keep spraying for? Which is super common, and I know it's something that we were trying to figure out at the very, very early stages of this thing.
Yeah. No, it's a moving target. I'll say that for sure. And we've gotten way better at over the years, better at it. And so it's part of one of those things that's just like reading your plants, just like you can read the health of your plants after you've done it long enough and kind of figure out what you're doing wrong without having to pull out the book or start asking questions on the forums or whatnot. But it definitely what we wrote a I wrote a very as in depth as possible instruction sheet on our that's available on our website for doing the STS reversals, but it's a moving target no matter what. But I think what we published was around 20 days. But what we really look for is the the buds to start to form, for sure, knowing that the male pollen sacs are forming, but not waiting all the way up until they open. I do believe that too much STS is detrimental, and I think we go into that in a future question here. But I think in general, when you know for sure that the pollen sacs are forming, they're not going to stop forming once they're there. So they're going to continue to build uh, once they're visible. So I wish I had a solid answer, but we really read the plants and do it on an individual basis, and especially if we've reversed stuff before, then we normally experiment. Like I had said before, we'll actually run a few different plants with different regimens and see which it how it likes it the most.
All right, so that kind of goes into like another a follow up question, I guess, to the subject, which is there a certain point where I can stop spraying once the pollen sacs start to form, or do I keep spraying the plant even after 3 or 4 weeks? Also,
Okay, yeah.
I guess would be, can I use too much STS?
Okay, yep. So it's a similar question, and it's got a similar answer, but um, definitely, again, let them form when you know for sure they're coming. Um, you can stop, and absolutely you can use too much STS. I think it's actually detrimental to the plant in that it's more likely to get those kind of open pollen sacs that don't produce any pollen or very little. I like to have a microscope, and when you get good at it, you can tell from 10 feet away. I mean, not even kidding. I can look at a reverse plant, maybe not 10 feet away. From 5 feet away, I can look at a reverse plant and tell you if there's pollen in it. And it's this certain look they have, and I call it the deflated balloon. Like the pollen sacs look deflated, and they're just like they fall off really easy. So if you see a ton of pollen sacs laying on the ground underneath the plant, there's a good chance it's a low production reversal. And I also have a microscope, and I'll check them out. Uh, and usually when I do that, it's more like just questioning how many actual pollen grains are on this thing. And there's been times where I don't think I've ever actually seen one that had zero or none, but I've seen where you can actually count the amount of pollen grains that are on the sac with a microscope. Whereas a fully loaded one, I mean, there's hundreds of thousands, literally. I'm not even making that up. Maybe even millions. Like, so they're, it's it's night and day difference. Essentially, it's non-viable at that point if it only has a few grains on it and you can count them. But you can tell by the color of them, and you can tell with that deflated balloon look. And I'm actually planning on posting some pictures. I've been taking some over the years, and I want to maybe I'll follow up with on our page with some more details on that and how to tell. But yeah, the color yellow, they just have a specific yellow color when they're loaded with pollen, and when you get good at it, it's real obvious.
All right, so I just want to cover some basic ones and just check them off the list. Do I need to spray every single day or once every 3 days? I know you spoke on it earlier. We're figuring 3 to 5, correct?
Yeah, every day's pushing it. I don't think that's necessary. I've heard, in fact, Brothers Grimm, Mr. Soul. I watched a talk. It was probably the same talk I referred to earlier, possibly, where he mentioned like they spray one time. Now we've tried that, and boy, that's sketchy. Like you'll usually get some pollen sacs, but um, we don't do the one time method. Now he might have a different STS mixture or something. So I'm certainly not saying that he's wrong in what he's doing. They're obviously very successful at it. But we normally do it the every 3 to every 5 days, and that's strain specific. And again, we test our strains before we do a production run. So those are the things that you have to learn on that strain. And I highly recommend that if you're going to jump, commit, you want to take the long route, the proper route, and it'll actually save you money and time in the future. And if you get a good production run, you can save the pollen from it and have it for the next time, or have it stored away in cold storage for future use. So it's not always bad to just have some extra reversed pollen sitting around. It comes in handy sometimes.
Now, I just want to take this one off the map. It's a common question, like 2 common questions that we get that are huge misconceptions. No, you cannot use our STS spray or any STS spray to reverse a male into a female. And no, you cannot spray the STS directly on seeds to make those seeds feminized. I just want to cover that because it's like recurring in comments across all platforms. And I just want to like take that one off the chessboard for everyone.
Yes.
Okay, so one common question that we get that I would love for you to answer, just to establish this, is what makes our STS formula different than the common formula found on the internet?
So we've tweaked the recipe over the years, and I'll be perfectly honest. I don't have the numbers in front of me on our the exact mixture that we do, but we do 2 things different. One is we actually make the STS itself, the part A and part B, different, and then we mix it different, and we make it stronger than the kind of standard recipe. And this was through quite a bit of trial and error of just having problems with just either not producing any sacs at all on certain certain shots at it, or I think making it too strong and then getting it where we just had tons of pollen sacs with no pollen. And that goes back to where I say, yeah, I think you can certainly overspray STS. You end up with these super packed, tight flowers that are just jam packed full of empty pollen sacs. And so there's a happy medium there with using this
Yeah, I mean
product.
it's similar to female bud structure, just pollen.
Yeah. Yeah, I have a few pictures on our website if people are interested and have never seen what they look like. I mean, they look exactly like a female flower. They're just jam packed full of male, male, male pollen sacs. So, yeah, you definitely, we've just tweaked the recipe enough to figure out where our happy medium is. I've personally never once had a failure of producing the pollen sacs. I've certainly had failures of pollen production and low viability, but with our mixture, I've never one time seen it not make pollen sacs. So that's kind of the guarantee I give people. Like, you're gonna get pollen sacs. As far as getting pollen, that has to do a little more with tweaking the spray regimen and possibly just a strain. We have had strains we struggled with. In fact, I was just talking to you earlier about this, Carlos. Our glue sniffer, people have been begging us for glue sniffer fem seeds um, for years, and we've failed 2 times in a row at reversals of those, and we finally pinned it and hit the nail on the head and produce some really nice reversed glue sniffer plants. So what we did different, I honestly don't know exactly, but we kind of just continued to change how we did it the time before, and we figured it out. So I think almost every strain can be reversed. We're still working on some. Our sour snow we've had 0% success on. I believe we've tried it 2 or 3 times, but never really tried super hard. So at some point we'll probably try that again. In fact, I think we're working on it right now. So just to see if we can do it. And this might be a good time because I mentioned I was going to talk about this, but and maybe this is good for another episode. I don't know, but should we talk about S1? Like,
Well, that kind of goes into a question that I wanted to go into. So, can you give me your opinion on reversing a strain that's already been feminized, and will I lose traits? Now, one thing I do want to say to people is, you mentioned earlier that before you get into the business of feminizing anything, whether it be for personal use or production, you should definitely be aware of the strain that you are going to use for that feminization project, because you're essentially banking on someone else's work. Now, whether you got those from a reputable source or not, um, you have the potential to pass on things that are undesirable. Um, Now, I know that that may or may not touch on what you're about to talk about, but can you kind of go into that and then go into your S1 thing?
yeah, and that's kind of a general breeding question, and it's definitely, we take it pretty serious that we don't like to introduce new strains into our breeding program until we've had quite a bit of experience growing them. We have an enormously wide availability of of strains around where we live and with our connections in Humboldt and Mendocino County. So um, we rarely actually find a strain that we're happy to run with and happy to kind of like adopt. And part of that reason is we're just not comfortable introducing them into our breeding program. Um, and so I highly recommend that, as you said, you get to know a strain before you just decide to use it. Just because it's good doesn't mean it makes good offspring. And this is a very common thing I've seen. I mean, some good strains don't put out good offspring. And this is this is something that's not just in the cannabis world or the plant world in general, but even in the animal kingdom, where you can talk to dog breeders, for instance, who raise pedigree show dogs, and sometimes there can be a champion show dog that never puts out a decent champion pup ever. And there's other dogs that aren't even champion show dogs that consistently put out champion dogs. So this is very much breeding is like this. So with terpenes, you got some plants that really carry the terpene like traits well, and others that don't, and they just fizzle. And we've seen this time and time again. So it's always recommended to run to do test runs with it, and this all takes time. And so, you know, the process should take a year. It shouldn't take 2.5 months. It should take at least a year, and sometimes two, you know, to really like find a strain, test it, plan with it, run a couple of test breeds with it, see what you like, and then move forward. So
And
and
that,
then,
that
you know,
you know, and that's a year, and we're very blessed to be able to say a year, because we have, you know, a core group of family members in Humboldt and Mendocino that can do test runs for us. We have our facility that we're doing our commercial runs in, and figuring out if that strain has commercial viability. For guys who are hobbyists, that 1 year process may be five years, you know?
yes, exactly. And so we're constantly running new strains, and sometimes they just don't pass the test in general, that we just don't like them. And we try not to just breed with hype because you know it's popular in a rap song or on the internet, you know. And we have a pretty as you know, our crew is some sticklers when it comes to picky consumers. So most of the time we end up with these hype strains, and we're like, what the heck is this? This is garbage, you know. Like, it looks pretty, but it's no good, and we're not going to introduce it into our program just because it has a name. So it has to kind of first just pass the basic smoke test and the quality test. And then, of course, we're also sticklers about the growability of it, because we're commercial growers. We're constantly uh, looking for strains that are actually viable commercially, and then still pass the tests of the actual, you know, flavor and terpene and smoke tests. So uh, honestly, not very many strains make it through our firewall, man. In fact, the last like strain that did was biscotti, and I don't even know what the next one's going to be, to be honest. We've got so much in the queue right now of really good back crosses and stuff that we're running with, that we're really not like out on the hunt for finding like the next new strain for us to introduce. But biscotti really treated us well, and it carried that terpene like I was talking about, like passing those just insane terpenes that strain has, and really really good flavor. And it's pretty grower friendly for the most part. um, and absolutely, you know, checks every box except for maybe the bag appeals a little low, but we've improved that with a couple of strains we've made with it. So I highly recommend, if you guys haven't checked out the Spice uh, or Girl Crush, which is coming out in 2 weeks actually, or 3 weeks from Wednesday on the 21st. Those are excellent biscotti crosses, and if you like biscotti, I promise you're gonna like the Spice and the Girl Crush more. So get a hold of those, because we basically stole the terpenes from the biscotti and passed on our potency and bag appeal from two of our other strains, Bad Girl and the Whip. I went off subject a little there, but did I answer the question?
So yeah, I mean, I think we covered it all. This has been a pretty long episode. I will probably decide if we chop it up into two as I start breaking it down. I know that we have a bunch of future episodes that are coming out, specifically one covering IPM, one covering our 2020 outdoor pheno hunt, where we go more in depth into all those strains that we've been harvesting over the last several days. And then just a few others on general grow questions. Adam, is there anything you want to say to sum up our STS episode?
Well, check out our website if you're using our spray, or even you're making your own. I mean, it's not that difficult to make. It's certainly economical to buy it from us, but it's you know, it's also economical to make your own. But yeah, you're welcome to check out our website and see the directions that I've tried to write to give a basic synopsis on the process that we use is as best as we can sum it up for a one size fits all pattern. So um, yeah, don't be fooled by naysayers on feminized seeds. I'm definitely not here to ruffle feathers, and I'm not going to argue. If you want to argue with me, I'm not gonna fight. I'm not gonna get in a fight over it. But um, I can tell you that everything I've said at this is based on our observations. So it's not fact. I'm not trying to spew facts here. I'm just telling you what we've observed, and um, so if you disagree, then that's fine. Everyone's subject to their own opinions.
Yeah,
Really appreciate it. So
yeah. One thing I want to leave everybody with, being that this is an STS episode, and I'm assuming that most listeners are either aspiring breeders or hobbyists. Um, as we spoke about, as you mentioned earlier about hype strains and stuff, I just want to remind everybody that, kind of what we do is not follow the hype. And that's not something to really like that we boast or anything. It's just, I want to impart on everybody to blaze their own trail. And whatever they do with intention, and do it because you like it and because you find a medicinal value in what you're using, or maybe offering a medicinal value to your friends. Never do it about the hype. It's kind of the wrong way to go. So just a little quip for the aspiring breeders out there.
certainly, I agree, and it's all about like showing the personality that your brand is in your brand, your brand itself, and um, so I think that shows through. That's the truth prevails in the end, and also just going on these mad wild polyhybrid um, breeding marathons is not really like the right what it's not the right way to do it for the community as well. So spend some time stabilizing those strains and kind of making them your own per se. Even though I'm always a big fan of kind of open source genetics and not claiming really anything as our own, and because this has been such a long process over hundreds of years of people, and we're just a small piece of this. So hopefully people can maintain that attitude and continue with that sort of philosophy. And I know there's lots of other people that agree with us and kind of run with the same philosophy. So let's keep this community as open as possible.
Agreed. So I just want to remind everybody to please submit questions on any of our platforms, whether it be YouTube comments, Instagram comments, DMs. You can hit up the contact us segment of our website. We're here every Sunday, 4:20 Pacific time on YouTube. Please visit 2020mendocino.com for all information on any of our strains or our spray. That's /STS specifically for the spray. Follow us on Instagram at 2020 Mendocino, at 2020 Oklahoma, and coming very, very, very soon, 2020 Autoflowers. I know we just got the packaging done on that, Adam, and a future episode is definitely coming on that. I would say this is post Thanksgiving, Christmas time accurate.
Yeah, I'm trying to tell people to shoot, for the end of the year. So we actually already have some seeds, but we're sticklers about releasing things before we've actually ran the production runs. So we yeah, they're they're available. They're just not available. So they're available to us. And yeah, I'm gonna be sprouting some of the first production runs now, and we've got some really nice watermelon Skittles, Triangle Kush, and some Biscotti Triangle Kush autos that were going to be some of the first ones that we actually test here in house. So, but lots and lots more in the queue. So probably over 30 strains that are in the lineup. So, which will probably get whittled down to less than 30, but certainly we've got a big shotgun blast going now of things to play with, and then we'll figure out what we like the most and run with that.
Yeah, and again, I want to remind everybody, it would be a very, very highly suggested idea for you to sign up for our email list over the next several weeks, and also just give us a shout. We will be releasing information on the auto release first through email and then through all of our other platforms for sure. So if you want to stay on top of the auto release, sign up for our email list. And I'll also be releasing a Croptober newsletter here in the next several days. So you want to be on top of that just so you stay in tune with all of our releases and all of the news that 2020 has to offer. We will be back next week. Adam, thank you for joining me.
Yeah, you bet, Carlos. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. See you next week.